Well, that works.
Okay. And let me just make sure you can see the share screen. Can you guys see that?
Yep. It's
Oh,
up
that-
there.
So that means everyone else can see it? Okay. I hope so. Okay, so I'm gonna actually stop the share and talk for a minute. So this week's Torah portion is Emor. It's a Torah portion that talks, part of it is it talks about the cycle of holidays. And as this happens several times with this curriculum, which I think is a good curriculum, sometimes they find a way into a conversation that isn't exactly a perfect fit for what the Torah is talking about. But they got enough of a launching point, and that's fine. The conversation is good, and all we need is a launching point. So today we want to talk about prayer. Tefillah in Hebrew, davening in Yiddish, and the place, not only the technical place of prayer in Jewish life, because it has its technical place, which is its own conversation. See the extent and the level of its technical place. It's also really about what's most important is about its psycho-spiritual place. The exercise, what does prayer mean? And its place really as a backbone of everything Jewish. So the way it would start off here is, and now I'm going to share the screen. In text 1a, says, this is from the Talmud. Okay. Who is assured a place in the world to come? One who juxtaposes the blessing of redemption recited after Shema to the evening prayer. This is so it's on page 142. 42. Okay. So this is a general thing that we find in the Talmud when in the morning service and in the evening service. They mention the evening service here specifically for a different reason. There we say the Shema. There's blessings which preface and follow the Shema, and then we go to the Amidah. And in Talmudic, in halachic Jewish legal lingo, prayer means the Amidah. Everything else is either a lead up or segueing away from it. When it says tefillah in Jewish legal things, it means, unless otherwise indicated, it means the Amidah. And there is no prayer service that we have really as a call to prayer service without the Amidah. It's always the center of it. So there says there's a special beauty to having the way it's structured, the way our prayers are structured, is because of what the Talmud says. There's a blessing after the Shema. The Shema, one is recognize the oneness of God. The oneness of God means not only that God is one and not two or not five, but there's oneness of God in the universe and oneness of God with us. And then we thank God for redemption. Redemption 3,300 years ago, and redemption this morning, or whatever we think about about God, how God is there for us. In that place of gratitude, both historical and macro and micro, we're ready to begin the Amidah. So it says it's one who is assured a place in the world to come. What does this mean? Obviously, if someone has led a horrible life, it's not just about saying that blessing together. It means that this is a beautiful idea of being able to daven properly, is that there's juxtaposing the blessing of redemption, which is right after the Shema, to the prayer. Again, it says that Talmudic quote is about the evening prayer, but it's not. It's about the morning prayer too. That's a more technical thing. So to move to text 1b, think about this time of the year. We just came out of Passover, so that's a time like we thanked God for the redemption, And so we're in that mindset, and this is a time we count the Omer. We're taking that gratitude that we marinated for 8 days in the idea that God cared about us, cares about us, heard our pain, took us out of Egypt, takes us out of our present Egypt, and brought us to Sinai, and we re-experienced that. And this is from one of the Talmudic greats, early Talmudic greats. It says, God redeemed us from Egypt to be his servants, as the verse states, for they are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. In the blessing of redemption, which we say every day, again, after the Shema, just before the Amidah, we mention God's kindness to us. And prayer is also service. When we say God serves, so we say service. What's a servant? The servant brings coffee and cleans up the table. Service of God is not so much. We're talking about service is prayer, which we actually in English we call it a service, but it's service. It means literally service, and we're going to get into that a little bit. Prayer is a service, as the Talmud states. That the Torah tells us to love God, to serve Him with all your heart. This refers to prayer, serving God, and then with all your heart. And we're going to get back to this. That's prayer. Prayer is a service. So when we mention the Exodus, and God says, now you're mine, I took you out, and I want you to be mine. And servant, we're not bringing God coffee. A central part of that is to pray, because that's what the Torah refers to as serving with your heart. And as we'll say later, what's a service of the heart? Prayer. So there's a very important distinction here, is that in the American Jewish mindset, that I know, maybe it's the global Jewish mindset, for many people, walking into a synagogue to be part of a prayer service is to get a prayer book and either listen to words being sung or said, or to, if you can, say the words. It's very much, it certainly seems to be a verbal exercise. Say the words. And what we're going to talk about today is that prayer is very much an emotional exercise. And let me just stop it right here a second. In Torah life, we have a lot of action mitzvahs. Light a Shabbos candle, put on tefillin. The mitzvah is to do the action. Now, we do an action, we say, 1 second, an action mitzvah without intent and focus and feeling is like a body without a soul. So of course you want to have intent. But the mitzvah is actually putting on tefillin or lighting Shabbos candles. So if I see a FedEx guy with a name Goldstein, they say, by the way, he put on tefillin, I haven't done this since my bar mitzvah, so come in, I don't got time. He said, come in. Okay, I'll do you a favor, Rabbi. Just do an easy pass. And then they do it, and they're just trying to get rid of me. Technically, it's mitzvah. Kind of a lame mitzvah, but a mitzvah, because it's an action mitzvah. Then you have other mitzvahs, which are not action, but they're sentiment, our feeling. There's the mitzvah of loving God. There's the mitzvah of faith. Those are things which are not actions. They're really internal, to the extent that sometimes we can't even control it, because you can control an action more than you can control a sentiment. Someone's asking something. Is service exclusive to the prayer, or mitzvah is also a service? That's a great question. Anytime we do something, that's a service, but it does say there's service, serve God with your heart, and that is talking about prayer. But yes, it's fair to say that anytime we're doing, if you're outside changing someone's tire to do a mitzvah to help someone, that's also service of God. You're putting on tefillin, that's a service of God. Lighting Shabbos candles, service of God. But here we're talking about a service of the heart. So when it comes to prayer is, there is an action with words, but the prayer, what prayer really is about a feeling, a connection, an emotional connection. So whereas when someone puts on tefillin and doesn't care what they're doing, or lights Shabbos candles just to get me off their back, it's a lame mitzvah, but it's a mitzvah. Someone says words of prayer and is thinking about the stock market, are just not caring, in the words of Jewish, unlike other mitzvahs, in the words of the great commentaries over the thousands of years, say, what's the point? It's not about saying words. We do say words. We're careful about saying words, but the words are just an expression of a feeling. Prayer is about, it's a service of the heart, not of the lips. Now, secondarily to the service of the heart, we say we don't want you to just sit in meditation. We want your ears to hear what you're saying. We want you to articulate. The words will guide your feeling. So words are important, but the service is the heart. So when we mention the Exodus and immediately pray, we demonstrate that just as a servant is obligated to follow his master's command, so do we recognize the kindness that God did to us and that we are nurtured in a service. Recognizing that we're God's servant, because I'm going through this quickly because it's really not so on point. It's just they're trying to bring us to the idea that this time of year is a good time for us to talk about prayer. That's really what this whole thing is, just setting us up so they didn't just drop prayer on us for Sunday morning. Recognizing that we're God's servant because he redeemed us, motivates us to fulfill his mitzvahs. In turn, we merit a portion of the world to come. So the main thing is, it's an important time, since we hopefully Pesach, we thought about our own Egypts. We thought about God close to us. And then we think about how God has been good to our people. That's what Pesach's about. So that's a prayerful mindset. It's a gratitude mindset. And now let's talk about what prayer is, because anybody who's been exposed to Jewish life says, oh, Jews pray. And in fact, Maimonides, in his law of prayers, on 2a, which is page 44, he writes, it is a positive Torah commandment to pray every day. As the verse states, you shall serve God. Now notice, it doesn't say you shall pray. There is no mitzvah in the Torah that says you shall pray. There's no mitzvah that says you shall pray every day. There's no mitzvah that says you shall pray 3 times a day. There's none of that. It says you shall serve God, which, as Leanne pointed out, that could be through helping people. That's also serving God. But serving God with your heart is the prayer we're talking about, this emotional service where we feel close to God. We bond with God. And if you're bonding with someone special, it takes sometimes preparation. It takes finding a nice, quiet spot. It takes focus. It takes putting down the phone. It takes clearing the mind. It's trying to find that bonding within, to connect with the bonding within the other person. It's an exercise. And Maimonides says, just to start, it said, it is a positive Torah commandment to pray every day, even though it doesn't say there is no shall pray. But he says that's what it means. And we'll see Maimonides himself comes out in different ways in this, depending on the era. Text B, 2b. So also Maimonides, also he said it's mitzvah to pray every day. It's not a mitzvah to pray 3 times a day. That's rabbinic. But it's mitzvah to pray every day. What does that mean? It's a mitzvah to get up in the morning. You can see, you can speak, you can hear. Say thank you to God. Other great authorities of the time in 2b say, actually, no. The mitzvah of prayer is to pray and call out to God any time of distress.
I only distress.
Right. What this authority is saying is that prayer is about recognizing that there's a God who is a reality, who's not a fable, not something your grandparents told you about, who's real and who can help, and who can help and wants to help. So Rabbi Aaron Halevi is saying is the mitzvah isn't so much to get up in the morning and put yourself into a mindset and say, God, wow, I can't believe I can see, even though you totally expected to be able to see this morning, if you have a good vision. He's saying in a tough spot, if you're in a tough spot and you're calling an attorney and a doctor, which all is very normal and expected, but if you're not turning to God, you don't really believe that he's there or can help. How do you not turn to God? If I had an uncle who could help me in a specific situation, so I may be talking to people locally, but of course I'm going to call my uncle, unless I think my uncle's a schmuck, doesn't want to help me, right? Because if they're interested and they can, why doesn't my mind go there? So Rabbi Aaron Halevi is saying the mitzvah prayer is are you going to turn to God when you need something? Because if you don't, what are we talking about? What's the relationship really? How real is that relationship to you? So that comes up when the rubber hits the road.
Isn't that a concept that you get into, that you're not alone?
Mm-hmm. Very much. And I tell us the Bar Bat Mitzvah kids, if we can get into the practice of meaningful prayer, you're never alone. You're never. And the fact is, it's a very lonely world. It's a very lonely world because God's, if he's there, is past Pluto sometimes in people's minds. But the idea that God cares about me and my day and my life and my struggles, I'm never alone. Now, I'm glad to have someone human I can talk to, but never alone. And I think that's a very central part of this. Prayer means that we have a bond, and that bond is as safe as they come.
I don't know, it sounds a little hypocritical
Go ahead.
to only pray when you need something.
Okay, so that's a great question. We're going to get into that. It's not about God being an ATM. It's about recognizing that God cares and God can.
Mhm.
And bringing that, now, he's saying the fundamental mitzvah. Rabbi Aaron Levy prayed 3 times a day, not only in times of distress. What he's saying is the baseline is a minimum. Recognize if you don't, God doesn't come to your mind when you are in need. Like, there's no atheist in Foxhole, right? If there's an atheist in a foxhole, then they're really disconnected. Now, you say someone in a foxhole, they're just throwing a Hail Mary. I get that sometimes. People call me because I'm the rabbit's foot, because nothing else is working, so may as well try a rabbi. That's something. But here, what Aaron Levy is saying is it's not in its core. Again, that's not the practice. In its core, where Maimonides says every day you want to get yourself into a prayerful place, Rabbi Aaron Levy is saying at least at times when you are guided there by life, there's a need. And here, the prayer says, it will be if you hearken to my commandments that I command you this day to love your heart and serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. We say this in our Shema, and it means to love your God and serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. Serving him with all your heart and all your soul, that's what the Talmud says later. That's not about even working really hard to change someone's tire. Your heart and your soul means putting your whole persona into it. Now, Nachmanides writes that the entire notion of prayer isn't compulsory at all. There's actually no mitzvah prayer. There are greats who say there's no mitzvah prayer. It's an availability to us. You can't command an emotion. And it says it is a great kindness that God has afforded us, that he listens and responds anytime we call out to him. So prayer, in Nachmanides' mind, is not so much a mitzvah on us. The Torah is saying it's an opportunity God gives us. You don't want to pray? Knock yourself out. See if you can take care of this yourself. See if you can live in a lonely world. It's not so much a mitzvah to pray. The Torah setting prayer, tells us that prayer is an opportunity that God, the Torah presents that God loves us. God is kind and wants to give and listens and responds. It's not, I'm going to force you to talk to God. Don't talk to God. So it's not, in Nachmanides' mind, it's not so much the mitzvah, but it's a position of Torah to know what we can do. Not only every day, but multiple times a day. And here, further in Nachmanides 4b, the primary message of the verse, serve God with all your heart, is to hand down a positive commandment that all our godly service should be with a full heart, namely with proper attention for his name without any negative thought. So he says we're not telling you, he disagrees with that perspective, that service of the heart means prayer, but more like what I negated before. But the idea is, if you're gonna give tzedakah, do it with your full heart. You're gonna put on tefillin, put it with your full heart. Proper intention, full intention. This is 4b, which is 46. The primary message of I'm sorry, we should never do any of the mitzvahs without intention or doubting whether or not they have any purpose. And this is in the spirit of the verse: you shall love God with all your soul and all your might. Namely, there's a mitzvah to love God with a full heart, so much so that we're willing to risk our property and our lives for this love. So he says the love is about just loving God. He said the prayer part is something we can use. It's an open avenue for us, but it's not thou shalt. If you're not spiritually attuned enough to pray, that's your issue. So in text 5a, this is from another great of the Middle Ages, it's only appropriate that anyone who believes in providence must believe that prayer will help them and save them from misfortune. If one does not pray in a time of trouble, it's either because they don't believe in providence or because they do believe in providence, they doubt God's ability to save them, both of them which are forms of disbelief. Now, to Eric's point before, prayer is not just about asking God for things. That's very shallow. But how we respond at a time of distress tells us something about ourselves. I've mentioned different times. I think it's a helpful insight that the mission of the Talmud with regard to laws that are beyond these laws of purity and impurity, it analyzes different types of animals and categorizes land animals and sea animals. And then it mentions something which is probably like an otter. The Hebrew of it is a sea dog. Let's call it an otter. It says, is that a land animal or sea animal? Spends time on land, spends time in the sea. So the Mishnah's advice is watch where it goes in a time of stress. It will revert to its comfort zone, to its fetal position. And where it goes in times of stress tells you what it really is. And so, in other words, that tells us that in that case, a sea otter, that one I think is a sea animal, but this is about not so much, the mitzvah is if you need something, ask God, and God's the ATM. It's not that. It's that where do we go emotionally? And we should only we can know that. In a time of stress, we should feel close enough to God, and God should be real enough to us to say, God, I'm going to call my attorney, but help me out here. God, I'm going to the doctor, but every doctor needs God's blessing, whatever it is. That we don't feel alone, that God's right there with us. And of course, that's where we go. And if we find in ourselves that that's not there, then we should try to cultivate more of a closeness, a bonding. Okay. This is in 5b, this is from the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. Prayer is one of the foundations of our belief, because through prayer, a person comes to know and understand that God alone runs the world and supervises every detail of his creatures, and he alone has the ability to deliver salvation. Now, here, we're getting a little bit closer to where we're going to speak here in Torah, but certainly in a Chabad, in a Hasidic, or I can speak more for Chabad, lens of looking at Torah life. Prayer is a foundation of who we are, because it's like there's a whole Torah, and then one of the mitzvahs is believing in God. It's all predicated on God. And there's actually, in counting the 613 mitzvahs, there's a big debate whether belief in God is a mitzvah. Mitzvah itself means commandment, which presupposes a commander. And as one of the medieval greats has said, how does that sentence go? There is a mitzvah to believe in God. When you said the word "there's a mitzvah," means there's already a God, because there's a mitzvah, a commander. So God is the foundation of the mitzvah. It's not one of the mitzvahs. And indeed, there are those who say prayer is not an official mitzvah because of that. It's a foundation. It's about the relationship. they command the relationship. Without that, what else are we doing? Hanukkah, Passover, Yom Kippur, but God, I'm not so sure. Yeah, if that's what people do, cool. I don't want to discourage anyone. I don't want to discourage anyone from doing anything for they come, do them to hate. That's why I'm not. I just like when people do the right thing. But what we want to try and cultivate is prayer is a foundation of our belief, because there we feel that there is a God. Now that also, it's not something you can command. How many people do I know who say, listen, I'd love to believe in God, I just don't. What can I do? Surgically implant it? It is what it is. You can't command certain things. You can't command someone to love someone. You can command someone to reframe how they see someone, but you can't tell someone to love someone. You can't command someone to understand a theorem. They can try, but there's certain things you can't command, and not legitimate commands. Think about your children. You're going to say, you must understand the Pythagorean theorem. No, you must work at it and do your homework, and try to. Or you must love that kid in school. You don't have to love that kid in school. You have to be respectful to that kid in school, even if you don't like him. Or you can hopefully reshape how you see him or her. Prayer, you say, this is a feeling that there's God who ultimately has control of all the world and supervises every detail of us and has the ability to deliver salvation. It's a faith. Again, I'm not saying you can command a faith, but as what I might say is we should be faithful to trying to feel that faith. We shouldn't just discard it and say, I don't. You know something? I'm doing this for 30 years. Sometimes it sinks in. Sometimes someone who said 20 years ago, it doesn't make any sense to me. Now says, I get it. Maybe not like you, but I get it. So if you look at text 6, this is the piece of Talmud that I had referenced before. It was taught regarding the verse to love God and to serve Him with all your heart, which we say in Shema. It's a prayer. It's a verse in Deuteronomy, which is the service of God that is performed in the heart. You must say that this is referring to prayer. So the service of the heart is prayer. Now there also, and this comes to what we were talking about before, and as we go forward, service. When you say a servant, we're God's servants. A servant works, and it's hard. Prayer, it may be boring. It may be hard to sit there, but it's not hard. It's not difficult work, but it actually is. Because focus is difficult. Inner introspection is difficult. Prayer is about trying to clear our minds. That's not an easy thing. Prayer is about trying to find our godliness within, to be able to connect with God. That's so simple. Keeping your mind. When I was in yeshiva, and we were studying 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m., we're totally, drank the Kool-Aid on an island of Torah. I remember one of our teachers, one of our spiritual mentors, saying, try to get through one page of prayer, an entire page of prayer, without your mind wandering at all. Imagine that. And that was an accomplishment for a bunch of guys looking like me. Because the mind jumps, and you got things on your head. And here you're reading a psalm. It's work. Text 7 from Maimonides. This commandment, because we started off one paragraph earlier in text 1, but in text 7 he says, this commandment obligates each person to offer supplication and prayer every day and utter praises of the Holy One, blessed be He. Then petition for all his needs with requests and supplications. So petition for all his needs means, okay, but God, the roof is leaking and I don't have money to pay. But supplications is again also that's an emotional thing. At least in the Hebrew of it, there's God, please help me, I need your help. And finally, give praise and thanks to God for the goodness that he has bestowed upon him, each one according to his own ability. So prayer is, in our liturgy, the first word of prayer is hodud, means praise God, thank God. So you really can't begin prayer in the way we're talking about it until I think feeling grateful. Feeling grateful to God shouldn't be that difficult, but it shouldn't. It's probably not that instinctive either, because, like I say, you wake up in the morning, you're thankful for your vision. Unless you have eye problems, you're not thankful for your vision, for your hearing, for your mobility. These things we take for granted. Life is like that. So it takes, and our services guide us there. Our first morning prayers are to thank God for these things that we will naturally take for granted. Every morning, I go through an exercise because I'm reading, and I go through an exercise to call attention to things that would not come into my mind, things that I should be feeling thankful for. That's a preparation for prayer, which is you want to be in a grateful place. Grateful means there's a certain humility that God has helped me, right? I couldn't do it all on my own. And then say, there's a humility, but there's a bond. Like, God helps me. God cares. And then we're going to give requests. But requests, and this is an important thing also, because the Talmud says it's, if prayer is just about saying, give me this, give me this, give me this, the language of the Talmud is it's like a dog barking for food. If we're nothing against dogs, but it's I want something. If it's about God, thank you, and I know I'm here for a reason, and you, God, put me here for a reason, and here's something I need in order for me to be who you want me to be, right? If my physical needs can get in the way, or my emotional needs, whatever it is, that my wants, my deficiencies can get in the way of me being the productive human being you want me to be. So I need this, not so much because I need this. I would say to pray to God for a Jaguar, probably not. I don't know how that would fit in. But to say, my car broke down, without that, I can't get where I need to go to be the productive human being you want to be. It's not so much, it's not about me. It's about me being who you want me to be. And that's where prayer should be. But also, that's all part of the relationship. And then give praise and thanks to God for the goodness He has bestowed upon him, each one according to his own ability. There's, not that this is such an unusual thing, but my father is, thank God, is approaching his 89th birthday, and he's got his physical challenges. But in the past couple of years, whenever I ask him, which is every day, how are you feeling? He has the same line in Hebrew. It says, I'm thankful for the past, and I'm asking God for blessings for the future. That's a prayerful mindset. Text 8. This is from the Rebbe. The mitzvah of prayer is unique from other mitzvahs. While one must indeed verbally articulate the words of prayer, that is not the act of the mitzvah. And as I said this before, you come to a synagogue and you say the prayer. Let's say you know the prayers. You remember from Hebrew school, you know what you're observant. Person davens 3 times a day. They know them by heart. A lot of people do that. You come in and you say the words, that's not called prayer. You're saying words of prayer, but it's not. While one must indeed verbally articulate the words of prayer, that's not the act of the mitzvah. It is to offer supplication. Supplication, as I say, I don't know if it's so much in the English, but in the Hebrew, it's an emotional thing, a feeling of I need you, God, and prayer to God every day. Supplications are things that are felt in a person's heart, not in action or even speech. Now, it's true that all mitzvahs need to be performed with intention. And if one performs a mitzvah without intention, they have not discharged the Torah obligation. Still, this is only about the intentions that must be incorporated into the mitzvah, not the actual mitzvah itself. By contrast, when it comes to prayer, the act of the mitzvah is defined as devotion and feeling of the heart. So prayer is really about the connection with God, and then you have to and expressing it in Hebrew. So, I want to we'll go now. We're going to go forward with a little bit more of this, but yeah, go ahead.
All right, so God has a plan for Rhonda. He has a plan for me.
Yes.
So when I pray and let's say I ask for courage to deal with something or whatever, how does that juxtapose that the plan may not include what I'm asking for? Like, the plan is set, so I can.
I wouldn't say the plan is so set. I think there's a little flexibility there, but
Is there a belief? What I'm trying to get at is there a belief that prayer can matter?
definitely, and there's language in our prayer. Pretty often, every prayer service. Yehi ratzon milfanecha. May it be your will. What does that mean? May it be your will means now, starting now. I'm asking you, not what you wanted from me. I'm 55 years old. Not what he wanted from me 55 years ago. Today, I'm asking, may it be your will. So there is flexibility there. We say that God, and sometimes we say God has this general overview of our lives, and some of it's up to us. And if we choose to go in this path, that's what'll happen. We're going to choose to go in that path, that'll happen. And we ask God, some of it depends on our asking and our entreaty and on our mining the relationship to bring it out. So we say, God, I want to bring out your will. You're a parent. And when a child asks a parent something sincerely, even if it wasn't exactly in the plan, sometimes if it's okay, if it makes sense and it's good for the kid, okay. Now to get God to change his mind, we're not that's beyond, it's an anthropomorphic thing, but still the idea is definitely there that God sets it up that way where we can shift things, and prayer shifts things. Excuse me 1 second, there's another chat question on mental stamina. Shachar, the morning prayer is about 40 pages, and it's hard work to stay focused, be thoughtful, intentful, and emotional all the way through. Respectfully, it would be more authentic to just limit praying to one's mental stamina. Definitely. I mean, I don't want to institutionalize that, but the Talmudic frame, I can quote you the Talmud, that it's better that there be less with proper intent than more without proper intent. When one of my kids was 13, 14 years old and away to yeshiva, and he complained to his principal saying that at night he's tired and then he has to go read 6 pages of the bedtime. He said it's a hassle, and his principal told him, if you are ready to walk over to the wall, put your head on your arm and say to God and mean it with everything. God, I love you. Good night. It's on me. Don't worry. You don't have to worry about the 6 pages. And I actually, there was a good instruction. I'm into liturgy and the things that said, but it's really saying for a 13-year-old saying 6 pages of liturgy that he doesn't want to say, and he's trying to get through and probably just blurring the words, is not going to be even close to as valuable as saying something genuinely to God. So that's the answer to that. Again, I'm not telling people to cut short, but the answer is not mine; it's Talmud's answer. Better less with proper intention, and maybe you can expand it. And if you look at text 9a, what is meant by proper intention? One should clear his mind from all thoughts and envision himself as standing before the divine presence. Therefore, one must sit a short while before praying in order to focus his attention and then pray in a pleasant and supplicatory fashion. So this is Maimonides, but this is actually a very important, what we're getting into now is a very important element of how we do things in Chabad, where we try to never pray without preparation. When I was in yeshiva, we would get up in the morning, we'd go to the mikveh, we'd study from 7:30 to 9, study spiritual texts, and we started praying at 9:30. at 9 o'clock, you maybe take a coffee and sit down and say some preliminary prayers, get yourself together, and prayer doesn't start till 9:30. So we had spent about 2 hours preparing for prayer. The 2 hours were very often talking about emotional things, talking about God, talking about the soul, studying about it. So it's, one of one of my teachers when I was in London said it's set up. So first you pray and then you pray. Pray if it's about coming to emotional connection. We don't want to just walk in. Walking in off the street, for me, walking off the street to some synagogue or whatever it is, and I just sit down and open a book to read, it's not going to be. I can get the words done. I might be able to get some feeling. It's not going to be. I have to get into a mindset. It's like any important relationship. When you want to make it an important bonding time, you think about it in advance. It doesn't happen passing each other in the hallway. It doesn't happen without any mental preparation. It doesn't happen when you've got a bunch of things on your mind. Clear the mind. Put life's stresses and sodas to the side, and things I have to do later to the side, and focus. That does not come easily. And the Mishnah tells us in 9b that the original pious ones used to wait 1 hour and then pray in order to direct their hearts towards God. There's always, before prayer, there would be a time. What do you wait 1 hour? What are they waiting for? The idea is just slow down the world, their world, which was, I would imagine, much slower compared to ours, and clear their minds.
Is that the purpose of the Zimra and the structure of the service?
The structure of the service wants to get you into that. The structure of service is meant to help you get to an emotional place, but we would want to do it before you even do the Psukkah de Zimra. It's before you say the first word, get yourself into a mindset, zone in, into a bonding mindset. Yes, but that's the way our morning services are structured. They try to build you up to a crescendo so that you can be in the right place when it comes to the Shema and the Midah. Look at text 10, just to focus more on a Chabad perspective on this, which again, I think it's a Torah perspective. It's our perspective of Torah. When Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Ladi, the founder of Chabad, the first, known as the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, text 10, neared his 20th year, so he was already a big boy. He's almost 20 years old. With the consent of his wife, he was already married, Rebbe Tzimshterna, to travel to a center of Torah learning and service of God. He was someone who lived his whole life studying Torah. He was a genius and obviously very committed Jew. But he wasn't yet a Hasidic Jew. At that time, Vilna and Mezrich were the great Jewish capitals of Eastern Europe. Vilna was the seat of Rabbi Eliyahu, the famed Gaon of Vilna. This is a globally respected person. The Vilna Gaon, who was the leader of the non-Hasidic world. And Mezrich was the hometown of Rabbi Dov Ber, the Maggid, leader of the Hasidic movement. So he had these two great citadels of study which he could visit. He could spend time. Related Rabbi Shneur Zalman, I debated as to where I should go. I knew that in Vilna, one was taught how to study. And in Mezrich, one could learn how to pray. To study, I was somewhat able. But of prayer, I knew very little. So I went to Mezrich. Now, here's a guy who's 20 years old. He's an incredible genius to see the things he did when he wrote when he was 14. What do you mean he didn't know how to pray? I guarantee you he knew every word of the prayers by heart. And he knew every law of prayer by heart. Prayer is about, how do I get into the emotional space? And then he concluded, the Almighty blessed me with making the right choice. I became a devoted disciple of our Rebbe's. And upon my return to Vitebsk, where he lived at the time, I guided my students in the teachings of Hasidism, which were well received by them. One of the elemental pieces of what we'll call the Hasidic revolution was this passionate prayer and focus on prayer. One thing that scared the daylights out of other observant Jews, saying, why are they getting so caught up in this? It's like it scared them. The idea, you okay?
Yeah.
Isn't that hot anymore?
It's scared. Because they weren't used to seeing it. Even though we find that in the Talmud, that there was something like that people waited an hour to prepare. 1 second, this is in the chat. Are there multiple points in the Midah in which one can insert personal prayers? Generally, what's seen as the best time to do that is, at least in verbalizing it, saying words, is one of there are 19 different blessings in the Amidah, in the morning Amidah. Actually, all three Amidas, and there's one that begins Shema Kolenu, hear our voice, and in there, it's more generic. God, please hear our voice, and you can insert it there. As far as what you're thinking, that can go, and wherever it fits in, that's fine. So I'm talking about just about verbalizing. So here, the Hasidim was very much about prayer, and what we've, interestingly enough, what has come to light in the past 30 years, and some things I have copies of, where the Russian government kept very good, very good records. So there are records, extensive records, of when this Rabbi Shlomo Zalman was arrested by the Tsar twice, by the Tsar, partially because other people in the Jewish community ratted him out, but that he was a danger to society, and so you have the questions he was asked. You have trial proceedings. It's fascinating. It's from the 1700s, and a lot of it focused on prayer. Like, what is this? What do you guys do? What are you thinking? They felt it was dangerous. Let's go. 1 second. Oops. Okay, text 11. This is from the Rebbe. The first stage in a person's. This is, well, the Rebbe is quoting here his father-in-law. The Rebbe has a book of daily thoughts, and this is one of them, which is for a couple of weeks from now. The daily thought is that the previous Rebbe said the first stage in a person's spiritual decline, God forbid, is a lack of effort when serving God in prayer. So prayer is the basis of everything. Everything becomes parched and cold. Without prayer, there's no relationship. Imagine someone's not feeling something for a spouse. Okay, I'm still cooking. I'm still taking out the garbage. I'm still doing, but it's cold. It's not a relationship. Even the routine performance of mitzvahs becomes burdensome. There's no love there. There's no feeling there. So what I'm doing mitzvahs because I have to do it. Okay, so because my grandparents said, my parents taught me to do it. It's not about an expression of love for God. One hurries through their observance and loses a taste for Torah study. And the very atmosphere becomes more materially oriented, and it goes without saying that a person in such a state cannot positively influence others at all. It's quite a mouthful, but this is coming from the previous Rebbe. He was talking to his Hasidim there, saying, if you're trying to live a Jewish day, and you're not feeling connected to God, what kind of a day can it possibly be? You can go through mechanics, but it's not going to be a feeling. Again, think about invaluable relationships. We should take the time, not just to do for someone special for us, but to appreciate who they are and why we do. Why it's beautiful that we do for each other. Not just because we stood on the chuppah together or whatever, or we're siblings. They mean something to me. And when someone means something to you, doing something for them is so much lighter thing. It's not a burden. It's for someone you care about. Text 12. This is from the founder of Chabad, from his laws of Torah study. Talmud describes how the original pious ones used to wait 1 hour for each one of the 3 prayers of the day, as well as spend an hour praying, and then wait another hour afterwards. It turns out they spent 9 hours engaged in prayer every day because there's 3 prayer sessions. You got to get something done. How are you going to spend 9 hours praying? We're worried about like 40 minutes for the morning service. This is 9 hours.
When you were a student, did you do the same?
We did not. No, this is one of those try this at home. But the idea is that there's always time before to get yourself into a mindset. The emphasis was always don't just open the Siddur. So in the morning we have an hour and a half. Afternoon and evening, you take a couple minutes just to focus and unburden yourself of where you're coming from. Why were they not concerned with the time it took away from Torah study, which is equivalent to all the other mitzvahs? Torah study is such a great thing, and this is one of the things that worried the other observant people about Chassidim. They're spending so much time praying. What about Torah study? They're not properly observant. It is because when they prayed, they would connect with God with such a strong and authentic sense of love and unlike fear, awe, respect, that they would be stripped of all materialism. An authentic connection with God with such love and awe is an even greater mitzvah than Torah study and supersedes it. As the verse states, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. 13. Inasmuch, this is from the Daven, as the very act of prayer is created through human work, again, it's effort, it only makes sense that the primary change occurs in the person who prays. The principle, let's finish it and then I'll explain. The principal idea of prayer is the notion that one stands as a servant before their master, before God himself. One ought to imagine themselves standing before God's presence, and then they become an entity that prays. When a person clears out any distracting thoughts and pours out their heart to God, that alone changes them from their previous standing. They are now in a higher space, a changed person. Prayer is meant to be transformational for us internally. If I know I have a coworker I just don't like, and it brings out the worst in me. Maybe it reminds me of me. I push his buttons, he pushes my buttons. And I pray and say, God, I want to be who I can be. And I want to be able to see in this person not only is irritating things, but that this is part of our organic family of humanity. And even if we're not going to be best friends, I want to be able to tolerate. And God, I want you, please help me to be who I know you want me to be, because you want me to be a good person, and I'm trying to get there. If I'm really wrestling with that during prayer, which is totally a prayer type of exercise, and speaking to God about it and hoping that God will help me with that, hopefully when I finish my prayer and I close the prayer book and I see that person, at least for 10 minutes, I'm going to see them a little different. Because it's about an introspection. It's about trying to get myself to a different place. And God's helping get into a different place. And I think this is probably the last one. It says, this is the Mishnah, tells us that there's one more, I think. There are 248 limbs in the body and 18 vertebrae in the spine. So there's what the limbs are is we can talk about, but this is a Talmudic axiom that the way we count limbs in the body is 248 limbs. Now, you see, it doesn't mention the spine, it mentions the vertebrae. So the spinal cord, this is from the founder of Chabad, the spinal cord that runs through all the vertebrae is not on the list of limbs. The spinal cord, and the doctor was going to tell me more, the spinal cord is so central. It's the sensory signals, it's the motor signals, it's the reflexes. It's the backbone of everything in the body. So the Mishnah doesn't even consider it one of the limbs. It's what sustains and bridges all the limbs from the head all the way to the hips. Is what delivers the life-giving energy from the brain to the rest of the body by way of the hips and thighs, all the way to the feet. Heaven protect us from the consequences of a severed spinal cord. And so it is in the analog with the mitzvahs, which are the 248 limbs of the King God. Our sages declare that all mitzvahs need kavanah, and that kavanah is prayer. Kavanah means focus. Prayer is the inner focus and connection of every other mitzvah, and is the mainstay that supports and animates all active mitzvahs. It is precisely like the spinal cord that sustains all of the limbs, while not being counted as one of the 248 limbs itself. So, from looking at it from here, prayer is a thrice daily exercise, but at least in the morning. If what we would probably call meditation, or contemplation of, because clearing the mind does not happen. So first we got to just, phone to the side, worries to the side, clear space for a relationship, and then focus on the relationship. And we all, without a doubt, have something to be grateful for. And that's a great way to start. Like in anyone, what do we feel grateful for in each other? Right? You have someone, a close one, you think about what you feel grateful for in that person. It's a great way to start building the bonding. We do that with God. And so taking some time for that, even if it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and finding something inspiring to read and to focus, and it takes work, as I said, just to zero in, and then praying, and fine, even if we're going for 15 minutes, but it's going to be a 15 minutes, a focused 15 minutes, or 10 minutes. That's what we're talking about. So I guess, what they said is, we don't pray, we daven. I mean, obviously, it's just playing with words, but the idea of this lesson is that we shortchange ourselves when we see prayer as reading a bunch of words. And frankly, I don't know why I would do that myself. It's like, why? If it's about refreshing a relationship, that's a totally different story.
I believe Andrea has a question for you.
I was wondering. No, okay. So, if there are any questions, I can do that. No, actually, I'm gonna have to go.
Don't hit end yet. I want to try something with the camera.
Okay. So we are officially done, and Eric's gonna try something with the camera. Thank you.
So,
But we're not. This is not here. This is only here for today.
Yeah, leave it hooked up.
Okay. Yeah.
so when,
Who has a question? No. Who had a question? No.
so once we start having services in the big room, so we have a men's section, women's section, and a no talking.
Prayer section.
No, that's not doing it.
But a dominant.
With the davening section. Yeah. You're gonna be in charge. I'm gonna give you a whip.
Acoustical tile.
A cone of silence.
Good luck with that. Sure. Okay.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Yeah, good one. Very well.